for watching this film. I'm Scott and this is TRS Vids, but today we're going to be talking about the Fomapan 200 Creative and we're going to pit it up against the Tmax 3200 Kodak. You know what, if you don't want to just quickly go out and spend a load of money on film and you need to just check it out, I'll show you some photos, see if it's the one for you. It's all my opinions, you know, feel free to disregard them, I promise you. But yeah, so thanks for watching. Now, I'm a photographer, I've been a photographer digital 15 years, and about 3 years ago, I really felt something missing and like in my learning. So I pitted it to the fact that I've never learned analog. So I've taken that journey on, and for the last 3 years I've been doing a lot more analog, developing, looking chemicals, all that type of stuff, just to learn. And I'm at a point now for the last year where I've started to put a few videos up that have done okay, so showing you how I use the cameras that I use, and I just figured it'd be a really good series to start actually reviewing some of the films that I've used and just showing you the pictures so that you can see yourself. And that's it really. I also do loads of silly stuff, just really fun stuff that I love creating just because I'm a bit of a geek. So check out the channel. There's a 35mm playlist if that's all the stuff that you're interested in. I always love to start these reviews off with a little bit of history because I'm a geek and I like that type of stuff, so I'm going to do it here as well. So starting off with that Tmax 3200, so it's a Kodak film. It started in 1988, it's got like a continuous tone and it's a panchromatic film. What does that mean? Just think of it as more of a modern tech that catches more colours, yes that's right, colours, I know it's black and white but we'll come to that in a second, than what the old style would have done. So really what it comes down to is it's catching more a wider range of tones is what I'd say. So it's from your blacks to your whites, and there might be a million tones in between that. You know, ever so slightly white, a bit grey, all that type of stuff. It catches the most you're going to get really, and that shows massively, I think, in this film. So, and it's all meant to get you a better quality picture and an overall look. Now, it's got a very, again, I think a very unique. It's got two films here, both the Fomapan and the Tmax, which I think are very unique to themselves. Which I think, at best guess, you could probably think it's that type of film, which is not always the case for a lot of other films. So that's what's really good about it. Now, a few interesting facts. Really, it was actually taken out of circulation and brought back in 2008 on demand, which is really interesting. It's actually 800 to 1000 ISO, not 3200. But it's meant to be designed, or has been designed, sorry, to be developed at 3200. So that's quite interesting. You can experiment with processing. For the purpose of this video, it's 3200 for me, and I've not pushed or pulled it, so it is just exactly as it says on the tin, if you like. But I have heard if you push it to 1000 and develop it that way, you do get a lot more contrast to it, and a lot more darker parts than the darks, if you like. So it's worth experimenting. I think for me, again, just for disclosure, this was a Christmas Day sort of shot. I picked this film because it was Christmas Day, because it was inside and because it was dark. I thought perfect, 3200 ISO, and I wanted to just grab some shots of the family. So that's what I used it for. If I was going outside on a bright summer's day, I can see where you might want to say, let's process it at 1000 and see what happens. But for me, this was all 3200. It was quite difficult for me to find a bit of research about the specifics of the Fomapan 200 Creative. So the company that make it are called the Forma Films. They've been around since 1921, when there was more of a public sort of government style company, and they're still around now, which is quite frankly amazing. But basically they started out like a lot of old sort of photography companies in that sort of chemical industry, massively focused in the 20s and 30s on really medical processing, x-rays, things like that, in that sort of medical profession. But as we got into the 30s, you start to see some film rolls coming out, and then predominantly the 50s. 50s were the big push, if you like, for black and white photography, and it's when there was a big market for it. So not surprisingly, they came out at that time with the Fomapan 200 Creative and other films as well. What I can't really find, and I'm not 100% sure, but if anyone watches this and they find something I can, then let me know, because it'd be super interesting, is the specifics of the Fomapan 200, because at the moment it looks like it was around from around the 50s like anything, and it's relatively untouched with small tweaks to the technologies as the years have gone on, but ultimately it has been around, you know, for nearly sort of 60-70 years, which is excellent. And because of that, you do get, I think, quite a unique black and white film compared to a lot of others. Right, starting off with the Fomapan 200, and a bit of a disclaimer here. I do love this film. Now, and the reason for it, it could be that it just meshes with my sort of style and how I like to, if you like, sort of portray images, but it's got a really sort of low contrast to it, which I find really nice. I.e., the whites are brought out in the shadows, which I find fantastic, and it gives you a lovely sort of, I don't know, so a balanced sort of white tone across the entire image, and for that, I think it's really, really cool. Now, instantly to me, if you look at these photos, for me it does scream of 50s, 60s black and white photography, you know, in that sort of like hippie era that you've seen in the past, and that's probably because that was most likely the style at the time, maybe, I don't know, but either way, that's the film, and that I love that. Now, for me, what really, really impresses me with the contrast and the sort of colour to it is the tones. So, for example, if you're on like a really bright summer day, the tones and the details that you get out of those highlights and those whites are just amazing, like you can see here, in my opinion. But at the same time, it does hold its own with the darks as well, and I think it just gives it a really like nice summer feel to it. And for me, if you're up for that happy sort of bright feel to it, this film is all for you, really, which is excellent. But how do I explain the 3200? Well, medium contrast, to be honest, I'd say. I think it's it's a nice sort of medium contrasty film. Boom. Right, review over. See you later. No, I'm joking. Medium contrast, this is what I would say. Due to the blacks not being very black, in my view, gives a really nice balanced sort of contrast to the image with some nice whites and sort of, it's, how do I say this in the easiest of way? So, if you've seen one of my other reviews, I've reviewed a film called the Kodak HR50, which has the blackest of blacks, really, really sort of high contrast, whereas this one here, I think, gives some detail in those shadows, basically, and keeps a little bit of details in the highlights, and it gives you a nice, I think, overall range. Not as much as the Fomapan does, in my regards, but if you were specifically doing portraits, I think that's where this might come into its own. So you can see, which we'll come on to in the grain in a second when I show you the difference, but it does give those skin tones like a nice balance, I think, particularly if you have some sort of artificial light. So the difference with these things I'm showing you, they might have the odd bit of light in it, but it was Christmas Day though, I was not doing any sort of planned stuff, like simply put. So if they happen to have a bit of light on their face, it was because the window was shining on them, or, you know, I got lucky. So I think that's the sort of balance of it. So everything that you're peeking out of that detail in the face is really from really mundane light, and it still works really, really well and gives it a nice balanced grain, I believe. So really, really good for that one. Compare that to the Fomapan, where if I'd probably use the same one indoors, because it's got that sort of what I would consider like a white film across the entire image that brings out the shadows and keeps the details and the highlights. I don't think the skin tones wouldn't be as pleasant in the Fomapan as it would in this 3200. So that's why, because it would have been probably too soft, whereas the TK Max still keeps that level of detail, which I think is really, really good for the contrast. So that's why, for that type of image, it is a really cool film to use, actually. It gives it quite a unique look. Starting off with the Fomapan, well, for me, really versatile. You can use indoor, outdoor, and the grain holds really, really well. I think its biggest asset for me is those whites and holding those highlights and the details within the highlights. I think that's a big plus for me. I think it really shines through in the images, particularly when you're outside on a sunny day and you're taking a photo. The way that this film comes across is, I don't know, you get some of those details that I think burn in a digital camera if you sort of expose in this way, which I think is really just massively impressive, really. I think that's really great. I've said before in the first section why I love this type of film. Even on like a white, bright, cloudy day, it does the same. And then when you stray inside, I feel like it keeps a lot of the detail in the highlights and shadows without a crazy amount of grain. So this is a really good image. I want to show you sort of the differences, and you can sort of see where actually it still holds its own, even though the light is just polar opposites of what we've just talked about, which I just think is really, really impressive, and it still keeps that profile, that style that it's got the same whether you're in or out, which is really, really impressive, because some films that I've used you know, you can take a photo in different light conditions, and you could argue that it's a different type of film, really. Whereas this, I don't think you can. I think regardless what lighting conditions you take it, I think it's quite easily spotted as a Fomapan 200. Grain and versatility. So, it's a high grain. This film is all about that grain. So, when I'm reviewing it, I'm again, you're gonna either laugh at me and think I'm mad, or you're just gonna think I'm rubbish. But I liken this to wine a bit as well, because I make my wine notes and things with my cousin, a bit of fun. But you know, bear with me. And with wine, I've got to the point now, particularly red wine, because that's what my choice is. I'll get to the point where if I'm having a bottle of Shiraz from South Australia, then I will sort of view it as a Shiraz from Australia. Whereas if I'm having a bottle of Syrah, which is the same grape by the way, in France, then I'll review it as that in France, because it's meant to be subtle and the Australian one isn't. So therefore, what I'm getting at is I'm doing the same with the films. This film is meant to have that really noticeable grain, because that's the style of the film. So I'm reviewing it like that. Whereas say the Fomapan isn't meant to be like that, and if I take shots and there's just loads of grain in the shadows or the highlights, then that's the type of thing I'll mention. So that's just something to note here. Now, yes, it's all about the grain, yes, it's high, but it looks cool. When you're looking at these photos of like the skin tones, for me, it retains that detail, but you can clearly see the difference between the skin and then behind it, where there's a slight bit of highlights, bit of light, boom, the grain comes flying in, and that's the difference. It's about keeping your focus, as if you're taking a picture, remember, and taking a portrait, you want the focus to be on the face, don't you, on that subject. So actually, the grain in the background really just adds to that focus, because effectively you're sort of focusing that eye into the bit that's the most sharpest, the most detailed, and that will be the face, because the highlights or the darks will have that grain around it, which I think it does really, really well. Massively impressed how it did in my house, because I have a very, very dark house, and just simply put, I really do. I only have 2 small windows, and all these shots are from that sort of darker end, so it is massively impressive. And I know from memory, the shutter speeds I had to keep fairly high because everyone's moving around. It was just a fun day, so just really, really interesting. And I think this film will be perfect because of the grain and the way that it's versatile for like a backstage. So you were paid to photograph a band backstage. They wanted it to be moody, they wanted it to be sort of gripping, and you know, give what they perceive to be sort of real detail and maybe that sort of like historic look. This would be the film I'd grab, definitely. Starting off with the Fomapan. Well, you're going to have one guess what I'm going to say here, aren't you? But it's great. It feels great. I feel like I could trust it regardless of the more or less lighting conditions. And do you know what? Right, and I'll come to this on the summary in a minute, but I just feel like it's a good mood film. I think that's it for me. I'm really happy to show off like family moments or really intricate moments, and I'd easily take it on a day that you just wasn't too sure what the conditions are going to be like. For me, if you're taking portraits, the skin tones are really nice and soft, and I believe that is regardless of the light to a degree, and I think that's really, really interesting about the Fomapan. It just gives that really unique look. Handling and feel. Well, it feels to me like a portrait style film in bad light. Is that surprising? Probably not, because I banged on about it all the way through. And I've literally, looking at my notes now, I can see I've already said in the grain and versatility what I meant to say in the handling and feel, which is it's a documentary style film. I'm trying to think of an example now, but yeah, if a sort of band wanted any black and white photos, they wanted to look rough and ready, but have the quality of a professional 35mm film, I would grab this. If someone said to me, we're making an album, it's all about happiness and about how would portray light in a dark moment in time and all that stuff, then this wouldn't be the film, because this is the opposite. I feel like it probably gives you that gritty look, that sort of, you know, taking a picture portrait of a steel worker in the mills in the sort of, you know, early 90s, stuff like that. I think because of the way that the grain comes out in the highlights, it won't be something I'd be using for like a landscape or you know, sort of like that street sort of style stuff that I do. I think I'd use it only for street stuff if I wanted specifically to get close-up portraits of people. So there you go. Now, going on to the summary, and then let's finish off and I'll let you get back to your cup of tea. So, Summary, what do you think? Well, I guess I'm hoping if I've done my job right and I've told you about this film, you're probably going to guess exactly what I'm going to say. So, Fomapan, again, I've used this analogy loads of times. If it's a feeling, it's a happy-go-lucky, cheeky chappy film. Get out there, have a good time, show the best of the world. If you are a 3200, well, it's not quite a really moody teenager, but I'd say it is in... Oh, I'll tell you what it is. It's that film where, yes, you think, oh, God, I really need to know this, but there's something back of my head saying, I don't know if this is right. That's this film, because it just piques your interest. It, like, makes it feel like you are in this, yeah, sort of grainy world that I don't know, just brings you back to a sort of historical point that you're not too sure of, and that's exactly what this film does. Really interesting. And honestly, and this is when I go back to it, I'd love to do this, and I probably won't get to do it, but I'd love to do a series on just portraits of people, strangers. I think it'd be great. I'd be really torn between this one and a couple of other films, because I feel like that will really bring out the character and the different sort of blemishes of people's skin tones. So yeah, that's why I think this film's great for that type of deal. But with this one, it's not quite cut and dry. I'd buy both. I really would, for different purposes. But there you go. Love them both. Get them developed and have fun with it. So, please subscribe, please like, you know the usual jazz. And share with your friends. I'll see you soon.